What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to our real estate and construction channel down here in the beautiful state of Texas. And today we have a very interesting guest. He's all around the world. Right now, I think he may be overseas. He is based out of Austin, Texas. We have Brennan Hussey, and he is talking about a really interesting topic. I know a lot of folks, that are subscribed to our channel are, actively listening to our show. They're not only interested in a lot of the bread and butter, very kind of standard real estate practices. And Brennan's talking about something a bit more creative, and I find it to be really interesting and honored to have him on the show. Brennan, how you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me, Aaron. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was, a short intro for you. I don't know if it did it much justice for you, but if you wouldn't mind, could you introduce yourself and tell us who you are and what you do?
Yeah, for sure. I think everything that you've said up till now is pretty accurate. I'll just kind of get into it a little bit. I'm more or less just a guy who saw a market need, and I was in a position a few years ago, um, really just where I was meeting a lot of sober people. I guess what you would call what I'm doing in this type of situation, transitional housing. A lot of people call it a lot of things. It could be three quarters housing, sober housing. You know, there's a lot of different names for it, and there's some subtle differences. I'm by no means an expert in the entire situation. I'm just a guy with some property. And after meeting a lot of different sober people, both in the Austin area and kind of around in different places, one of the things that I consistently noted was that there is a lack of housing. And so I was in a position because I primarily work in the transportation industry, the marine transportation industry. So I work with cargo ships, offshore oil rigs. If it floats, you name it, I'm your guy, right? So that's my day job. That's where the majority of my money comes from. So as Aaron said, I'm constantly on the move. I spend probably 220 plus days out of the year outside the US. And then I have a decent chunk of time off when I'm actually back in the US, back in Austin. So just along with that lifestyle, I was in a unique position um, where I was able to actually rent out some of the places or some of the rooms inside of my place to some of these people. And what I found was that rather than pretty much it's like, taking a residential house and then being able to apply it like a multifamily, right? Because if you have a four-bedroom house, you're able to rent out the rooms individually. And a lot of the tenants are um, they're happy with that, right? A lot of them are mostly concerned with having a safe place that they can go to with like-minded people. And um, I think providing, the basic necessities is really what it is that they're looking for. And then on top of that, if you're providing that safe place, then a lot of them are they're happy with it. Um, and so along with that too, you're able to get some of the higher returns and you're able to reduce some of the risks, even though and the irony is that a lot of them are lower risk tenants depending on what it is that you're looking for. Whereas I think a lot of traditional real estate investors would see them as being higher risk tenants. And it's because that a lot of other real estate professionals view them as being higher risk tenants that they actually become lower risk tenants to me. So, um, yeah, do you have any kind of follow-on questions to that? I know there's probably some detail in there that I'm missing, but that's kind of the general overview of what it is that I'm doing.
Brendan, I find it so interesting, kind of that last part you'd mentioned, almost that, a change in perspective, I guess, traditionally, maybe someone would view this as a higher risk, whereas you see it as a lower risk. I find that to be very interesting.
Yeah, for sure. So let me comment on that. I specifically rent to people um, who have addiction issues and usually come out of um, certain programs that some of the listeners may or may not be familiar with, depending on what their history is. And addiction issues, just based off of what I've learned about it, are one of those things that really is agnostic to class, color, creed, all of these different kinds of situations, income level, etc. And it really takes a toll on people's lives and really drives some people into some pretty dark places, honestly. But in the process of that, once they actually get to a spot where they are more, where they're in recovery, there are some principles that if you know what to look for, that a lot of the tenants seem to live by. It's very important that they hold a job. It's very important that they, live honestly. And these are certain things that a lot of different recovery programs um, will instill in a lot of these tenants. So I typically look for people that are not fresh off, not I particularly am not looking for people who are, say, fresh out of rehab or whatever. I'm looking for people that have around 3 months. And I do have my own criteria, but I will say that a lot of landlords are willing to select against people that have criminal records. And what I've found is that people um, who have been living, sober for, say, 3 months or more, tend to be lower risk tenants because they are living in a way that is, consistent with what a good landlord would want out of a tenant. So um, I'm willing to look past certain things that other landlords would typically select against for for that reason, right? And I do have a certain set of criteria that I don't think I'm going to share in this kind of forum because, I don't want anybody who would potentially rent from me in the future to know what that criteria is because it needs to be kind of kept to myself so that I still continue to get good tenants, if that makes sense.
No, sure. That makes perfect sense. Um, and I think it's so interesting, just really this entire concept. And I know that, maybe a real estate investor could deem this to be high risk, right? Especially, with something like this. I've heard maybe an investor say something along the lines of, well, if someone goes to jail, they're more than likely to associate with other people who commit crimes. So, in that environment, they're likely to learn different ways to commit more crimes. I'm not exactly saying that's true, but that could be the perspective of someone. Um, I guess in terms of accountability, is it more of you as a landlord or holding them accountable, or are your tenants kind of holding each other accountable along the way to kind of get to where they're going?
I think that your network, I have people who have long-term recovery who I am looking to, um, and that kind of gets into our way of criteria, right? There are certain things that you can look for when you're taking a look at somebody to see to take a look. Are they changing people, places, and things? Are they participating in a program, an ongoing program of recovery? These are some of the basic questions that I'm asking. And kind of like I said, there's other criteria that I have to kind of keep vague just because I don't want anybody gaming the system with me and trying to uh, say, hey, I have all these things figured out because that is a risk. And then I'm just going to say just straight up front, it's not the kind of thing for everyone. This is a vulnerable population, and yeah, I mean, there are some risks that I'm willing to take that not everybody would be willing to take, and I can't make that decision for anybody, right? I mean, if you're just looking to cash in and make a quick buck, then I would say that this isn't the thing for you because at a certain level, I'm trading some risks for other risks, and I recognize that. So this isn't, it's not a get rich quick scheme by any means, but rather it's a business that just like anything else, you're going to have to do your due diligence. And you're going to have to accept certain risks. I keep a stock of drug tests. You know, there are certain things that I have to do and have to take a look at that other landlords probably don't care a lot about. Or if they do care a lot about, they don't necessarily have to take a consistent look at those things, provided people pay on time. But because of the things that I say that I'm offering, I need to make sure that I'm offering those things. Like I said, the safe space is pretty key. It's very important to my tenants, and they're willing to pay more primarily because of that, more than anything else. So, I'm willing to do a lot to maintain that.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. And I think one thing that investors, any investor is concerned about is time, right? So maybe you're renting to the military, there's a base down the street, and you understand, hey, maybe these guys are on rotation, they'll be here a short time and then they'll leave. Maybe you work with travel nurses, they're here on an assignment, they're doing their work and then they leave. So the understanding, I guess, is understanding your target market. I guess for this sort of business, is there any sort of timeline or trajectory for I guess, how many people you'd have and how quickly they would eventually leave and you'd bring more tenants in or
Honestly, it takes time to clean up the wreckage of the past, right? Like if if you're theoretically or hypothetically talking about somebody with a conviction or say a felony conviction, those aren't things that go away overnight, right? So honestly, you typically are looking at people who are willing to stay. And honestly, a lot of times it just really depends on the conversation that you're willing to have with people. I'm me personally, and maybe this is putting money out on the table. I'm willing to work with people. If people are saying, hey, I need a place for 3 months I can um, until I can get the rent that I need to go get a place to go live with my kids or whatever else it is, then I'll work with that. Maybe that's 6 months, maybe it's a long-term thing. Excuse me, maybe that's a long-term thing where they say, yeah, I'm really looking kind of for a forever home, and this is the best. I have some people that are like that. So it's really kind of an individual question. And I do treat my tenants in that way, like they're, you know, it's not just somebody that I'm sticking in, and it's not just another door, fully realized human beings um who have their own lives. And so I'm willing to do that. And I'm willing to kind of take a look at the flexibility. But I would say just on average, most people are more willing to go for the 6 month leases. I think that's kind of what I'm looking at the most. And most of the time they're willing to renew. Um, there's been a couple instances where some people have had to leave uh just for work reasons. I had somebody who had a major malfunction with a car, and they needed to be by a bus stop so that they could get in. So they had no issues with staying. They told me flat out, and I believe them, that they would have stayed if I had my property closer to a bus stop. So it was just more of a location type of thing rather than a uh, I don't want to be here anymore type of thing. That is one thing that I will say about the properties, is that I would recommend to anybody looking at getting into this type of situation, uh, whether it be just about any type of transitional housing, that being by public transportation is 100% going to be your friend. And if you're not by public transportation, then you're going to be limiting who you can rent to. Because if you're in a spot like Austin, Texas, or say in the Midwest, you're if people don't have a car, then there's not a whole lot that they can do as far as getting to work and everything else. So you might be limiting who it is that you can rent to if you're not by public transportation.
sure that's a great distinction to make. I guess, in a lot of cities in Texas, you really do need a car to get around. And then of course, you kind of have to know your clientele as well, right? Not everyone has a car and just understanding as well, it's crucial to kind of be able to offer that, have your property near public transportation.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you kind of touched on it earlier in the show, but really converting a single family home to multiple doors. Could you touch a bit more on, how, you'd be able to do that with, I guess, with these sorts of deals?
Yeah, it's not as complicated as it sounds. I have a property manager. This person is somebody who has long-term sobriety and is intimately familiar with the community. And I think that's really key. I think if somebody wants to take what I'm doing and then carbon copy it, then you're not going to be successful if you don't have a person like that. It's going to turn into a trap house really quickly if you're just somebody on the outside. And that's not something that I would advocate for. Um, so you really need to know somebody who has long term, multiple years, has been living with it, knows the people, knows the players, knows who's who. And I have one of those people. They live in in the house. They get a percentage of the rent, and so then from there they're able to keep an eye on things, especially while I'm away. And then yeah, just the other rooms are just marketed it out. And the rooms themselves, behind the door, that is their personal, that is what they are renting, right? And then the other spaces are common spaces. So the kitchen, that's available for everybody. I was able to finance this based off of an FHA because I do occupy one of the units. So while I'm there, while I'm home, that's where I'm home. While I'm away on my business, I'm away on my business, right? But I do live and I do occupy one of the units. So all of that being said, it is negatively cash flowing at the moment because I'm occupying one of the units. But all of that to be said, I'm able to finance it using the FHA. Uh, and if eventually I move out, it'll definitely be cash flowing positively um, uh, based off of the rents that I've been receiving. But to be within the guidelines and you know to be within the FHA lines, I have to be occupying at least one of the units in there. So I hope that answers the question in sufficient enough detail. Is there anything in particular that you want me to go into more detail on, like how things are run or um, anything like that? Um,
Sure, Brennan, and that's a great distinction to make. The negative versus the negative cash flow versus, I guess, cash flow, right? You living there versus not living there in the FHA. Because I do know that a lot of our listeners, they have used FHA loans. They're familiar with the guidelines. Maybe others want to, and they're not. But yeah, I mean, if there is something you haven't said thus far, or you want to talk about maybe from an operational standpoint or how things are run, definitely, let it rip.
for sure. I will say that, with the prices that I'm getting, I believe within the Austin area, for um, a single family home, and the one that I'm using right now is a single family home. It's got four beds in it. Right now, the typical cap rate is about between 2 and 3%. I would be closer if I rented out all of the units and I wasn't occupying the unit. I would be in the um, between 7 and 10%. So, um, but before all of that, and one of the things that I did do as well as a landlord is, um, and this was a cost that kind of came back to bite me. There were a couple costs that I was willing to take on that also ended up pushing down the amount that I'm getting. The house that I purchased, it wasn't exactly in the greatest condition, so I had to replace all of the appliances. I had to put in a washer and dryer unit. I thought that was important for marketing, and I was definitely right. All of those to be said, I had to take on the financing for that. So that was a few $100s per month out of my pocket. The other thing that I did to get people in the door was I marketed it as all bills paid. And the reason that I did that to begin with, and I need to reevaluate this. So if somebody has any advice for me, I'd be willing to listen to them. Um, is I didn't want to get things into a situation where there would be infighting because I only have one meter. So I have no way of discerning whether or not, where the electricity and water consumption is coming from. So I said, listen, I'm the landlord. I'll take care of the bill. That's going to be that because I don't want people to be in a situation where they're fighting over who used what, because that could very quickly collapse uh some of the things that I was working toward. So with higher energy and higher water prices in the Texas area, and with multiple people living in the house, sometimes I'm paying as much as 600 per month on the utility bills. So in the future, one of the things that I'm looking to do to mitigate that is maybe adding solar, or maybe I'm gonna broach the topic of paying utilities later on, but honestly, I'm not entirely sure how that's going to go. So um, that is kind of like one of the lesson learned type of situations. But um, that was my logic to begin with, was that I didn't want infighting, because that is one of the things that can happen. And I figured at the beginning that that might be worse. I might be changing my tune a little bit as before, as I said, but kind of where things are at right now. So.
Yeah, no, that's definitely interesting, Brennan. Of course, wanting to, keep the peace, especially if everyone's living under one roof. I guess just out of curiosity, have you spoken to anyone that works in solar about this at all? The reason I'm asking, I don't know much about solar and how it could, cut costs, so I have no idea.
Just kind of through the personal network that I'm doing. Uh, there is someone in my network who works at a major um, solar supplier uh, in the Austin area. So it is something that I'm actively shopping for at the moment. And my understanding is that there's a lot of tax benefits for it, and just the geographical location of Austin, I believe, um, would make it something that would be worth it. I need to look into I need to do a little bit of cost benefit analysis. I haven't really sat down with a spreadsheet and crunched all of those numbers yet, but it is a solution that I'm actively taking a look at um, to help manage the prices. And my understanding, although I can't say this for sure, is that solar panels as an addition to a house can increase its appraised value. So that is something that I'm looking to do. Um, yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at as far as that goes right now, but it's something that I'm seriously taking into consideration.
Absolutely, absolutely. Brennan, is there anything that you haven't said thus far you'd really just like to hit home for our listeners?
I just really want to say that it really does take a certain type of person to get into this, and that it really isn't for everybody, and that's totally fine. But for the people that think that they want to help somebody, there's definitely money in it. So hopefully, if you get into the right reasons for it, then uh, you meet the right people, then anybody who's looking to do that, then I wish them the best of luck, and definitely reach out to me and tell me how it goes for you. Um, there's a lot of things that I don't know. I'm not a self-proclaimed expert. I'm just a guy with a house that I rent out to some people. That's about it.
A guy with the house that rents out to people, and you're all over the globe. That's one thing I did mean to ask you as well. I mean, how is that? You're out of the country for, like you said, 200 plus days out of the year, and it sounds like you're managing this remotely, right? So, maybe someone even being in another town, that could give them a bit of anxiety. How are you able to be across the Pacific and still have a handle on things?
Um, it really comes back to, I know this sounds really cliche, um, I don't know. Maybe my brain was better prepared for this because, working with ships and things like that, I have to trust that people are going to get things done. And um, I've just surrounded myself with some really good people, and that's worked out really well in my favor. I wish I could shout them out, but I don't think that they would want that actually. But they know who they are, and I definitely, I definitely have some really good people that are supporting me, and that's really the best that you can ask for. And that's what I would say to anybody is really approach a situation where you find someone who can help you out, and then let them run with it. Don't micromanage them. Don't, and this is kind of like leadership principles, so to speak. If you have someone who's good and they do something differently from them, if they do something differently from the way that I would do it, but I didn't stipulate those guidelines, I really can't be mad at them. The best I can do is give somebody a task and say, hey, complete this as best as you can. If they don't do it exactly the way that I would want them to do it, then but they still got the job done, then that's it. They did it. And you really have to be happy with that 80%. You know, you can't you can't expect that somebody who is a totally different person is going to think the exact same way as you. So I've definitely accepted that reality, and I work with it as best as I can because the other cost to that is if I do everything myself, then I'm just taking on another job. So I would say to anybody who's afraid of it that, that's kind of a fear that I see a lot of people, um, because I also have, another entrepreneurial venture. It's just a small cleaning business. You really have to be able to let go and let people do what it is that they're going to do. And sure, you're going to be let down, you're going to be disappointed. There's going to be times that it isn't going to go your way, but you need to recognize that it's all a part of the process because I know that I've definitely made mistakes in this process. So I can't really hold somebody to a standard that I don't hold myself to. So I think that's the best advice that I can give. And I think it's fairly universally applicable even outside of real estate, but that's the way that I choose to look at it.
Yeah, definitely well said. I think that's a nice way to wrap up, Brendan. Maybe we're down in Austin, Texas, another part of the country, another part of the world, or we just want to talk to you about what you do and sober living. Where can we find you?
Um, I'm on Facebook. I kind of keep a fairly low profile for a lot of reasons. I'm kind of running my thing based off of attraction rather than promotion. So, um, I'm available online, Brennan Hussey. I don't have I don't really have a web presence or really anything else, but if you want to find me, I'm not too hard to find. So I'm not really looking to work with just anyone, but people who kind of align with the set of principles that I share with other people. So I'm not really looking to self promote too much, but I really appreciate your time. So yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, well said, Brendan. I've learned a lot, a bit about about your background and what you do. You're able to, like I said, be across the globe and being able to manage, a really interesting concept. And thank you again and wishing you the best of luck.
thanks. I appreciate it, Aaron. Talk to you later.